Hello and welcome to another video. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button please guys. It really spurs me on to keep producing more videos and good content, or what I think is good content. Hello again. So this video is going to be a much more in-depth video about the anatomy of a cow's hoof. What's going on the outside and what's going on the inside. So stick with me and see if we can learn something. So unfortunately, where there's livestock, there will always be dead stock, which in some respects is terrible. Obviously we don't want it, but it gives us a good base and a good sort of platform for teaching. So here are some cadaver feet. These are both off the same cow. This is a right hand back foot, this is a right hand front foot. Now I'm going to go through the anatomy of the claws. The anatomy for both claws is exactly the same. There's different principles for trimming, but we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to just talk about the anatomy of the actual foot itself. So this is a rear right foot. This is the dorsal wall. So this front portion of the outer wall horn is actually called the dorsal wall. Same on both sides, obviously. This white band you can see here is called the coronet, or the hairline. Now the coronet is responsible for growing the whole of the dorsal wall, the whole of this outer wall horn. It starts off here and descends down the foot to the very tip of the toe. You can see all of these lines that form the wall horn. These lines are different patterns in the growth, so the wall horn will be growing extremely fast sometimes, it will be more slow other times, depending on the health of the cow, the stage of the calving, depending on the nutrition the cow is receiving and her environment. This is the solar horn, obviously the sole of the horn where the cow walks. The outer wall horn is grown by the coronet, or the hairline, like I said. The solar horn is grown by the corium, which is underneath. So the flat piece directly underneath the sole is responsible for growing this. So these two pieces need to be joined together somehow. And this dark line here, it's dark because it's dirty. But this dark line here is actually called the white line. And the white line's job is to marry the outer wall horn to the solar horn here, because obviously it needs to join somehow. If you look more closely at the white line here, you can actually see striations, these little lines, if you like, all the way around. We'll get into more detail in that when we look at the interior of the foot. So the white line starts around here, it comes up down to the tip of the toe, all the way around to the top, and forms the connective tissue between that outer wall horn, the inner portion of the foot, and the solar tissue here, and the solar horn. These bulbous parts here on both feet, this is the bulb of the foot, so the heel bulb. And all of this soft tissue up here, or soft horn, sorry, is called periople horn. It's extremely soft. Its primary job is to cushion the landing of the cow, so that is why it's nice and soft, because it provides cushioning for the internals of the foot, so the skeleton. Now if we open up the claw, you can see right in here, this is the interdigital space and the interdigital skin. This is where you're going to get lots of problems like foul in the foot, interdigital phlegmon, hyperplasia, interdigital dermatitis. So anything like that is going to get in here, and the reason for that is this horn in here, or skin in here, sorry, is extremely soft. So when it's subjected to wet conditions, just like you in the bath, me in the bath, it actually crinkles right up and cracks and allows bacteria to enter that interdigital space. Okay, so if we go back around to the front of the foot, this claw comes all the way up here. There are individual bones, 1, 2, 3, all the way up here, same here, and then they join the lower leg bone here. So when we're trying to describe where a lesion is, we might refer to the posterior or the anterior portion of the claw. So the posterior as in rump, bum, so the back of the claw, or the heel of the claw, is the posterior. The anterior portion of the claw is the front portion of the claw. So Now when it comes to trimming, we refer to the typical site and we refer to heel ulcers, all that kind of thing. So the typical site is what we refer to as where a typical sole ulcer would actually appear. Now that is this area here and here. So this inner portion, more towards the rear of the claw, is where you're most likely to find solar ulcers because of the internal anatomy of this claw, which we'll go into in more depth a little bit later on. Now these black marks here, there's one here, there is one going all the way down here, and there's one here. They're not bruising or anything, they are actually pigmentation. So just like a cow has black and white markings, or brown and white markings, or grey and white markings, feet are exactly the same. So they actually have pigmentation in the corium and in the hairline, and where the horn is produced, that is where the pigmentation is coming from. This horn is no different to white horn. Black horn, white horn, you hear some people say black horn is better. Personally, I would tend to think that cows with black horn on their feet, so a lot of Jerseys, Aberdeen Angus, things like that, they actually have better feet anyway as a breed, not as the actual colour, not because of the colour of the horn. Quick roundup: dew claws, medial claw, lateral claw. So the medial is the inside, the lateral is the outside. This is the axial wall, this is the abaxial wall. This is the white line running right round here, down to the toe and back up. This is the periople horn, heel bulb. So the heel bulb is the whole mass, the periople horn is this softer horn up here. Interdigital space is the portion between the claws, and the interdigital skin is the white skin you can see right up there between the claws itself. Coronet, or the hairline, is what runs from here all the way around the whole circumference of the actual horn, and that is what's responsible for growing the outer wall horn. All of the strength in a cow's foot is on this wall horn. The suspensory apparatus is suspended above the solar horn here. So that's why you've got two parts, and obviously you can't have the bottom of a foot completely open. Okay, so now a lot of the time, even professional hoof trimmers refer to the claws by the wrong terminology. So as I said, this is a right front leg, this is a right rear leg, and what happens is, so they're both like this, so this is the front and this is the back. Now a lot of people will refer to the back as this is the medial claw, so this is the claw that we want to return the weight to usually. This is the lateral claw, so it's usually the dominant claw. Now on the front claws, this is the inside claw and this is the outside claw. So instead of this being the problem claw, it's usually the inside claw. And because of that, a lot of people refer to the outside as the medial, when in fact medial means middle. So nearer the middle of the cow, so the inside claw on the front of a cow's foot is called the medial claw, and the outside is the lateral. Now if you look at the two claws, they are very, very similar. Obviously the pigmentation is different, but apart from that, the shape and length are very similar. More commonly on front feet, they are much wider stance. If you look, this is probably 4 or 5 millimeters wider than this. So this is the front, this is the rear. Now that's because the bulk of the weight of a cow is actually over its front feet. Okay, so moving on to the interior anatomy of the claw. Obviously this claw here is fully dressed, if you like, but what is happening in the locomotion when the cow actually flexes her ankles like this? Well, there's a tendon that runs all the way down here called the deep flexor tendon. And if you actually look, as I bend this, you can see the deep flexor tendon protruding out of there. And this tendon is moving in and out, up and down a sheath which runs all the way down here. Now, why do we need to know that when we're hoof trimming? Well, the interdigital skin, as I was talking about here, is susceptible to damage such as fouling the foot or foot rot and interdigital phlegmon. Now what happens with fouling the foot is the sheath, the bacteria enter the interdigital space here, travel up and infect the sheath which surrounds the deep flexor tendon. Now as you can see, that deep flexor tendon is moving very freely as I move it like this, in and out. But if the sheath starts to constrict, and I'll do that with my fingers just now, it gets much, much harder to move. And eventually, when it's completely constricted, there is now no more locomotion in this foot. If you can imagine all of this swollen right up, This tendon can no longer move in and out of that sheath. This is when you get a club foot, and that will never ever return to being a standard non-lame claw. Okay, so here is the same claw as the one we were looking at earlier. It's the front right from this cow. Now I've removed the top part of the ankle bone, so this part here. So I've actually sawn away through P1. So P1 is a bone that goes from here down to here, and then there is P2, which is from about here to here, and finally P3, which is the one down the bottom. Now P3 is the important one, the one that everybody mentions, the pedal bone, or the coffin bone, the distal phalanx, or P3. So it has 4 different names that are in common use. So as you can see, they move completely independently. There is no bone in this part here, and in fact up to about where my top finger is just now, there is no bone at all connecting the two. So if there is reduced locomotion, then it is all down to inflammation in the flesh. So here is the lateral claw. So the outer claw of the back right foot. Now as you can see, she's in pretty good condition. There's not much wrong. She hasn't been trimmed in a wee while because there's no modelling in the typical sole osso site. So we've actually gone ahead and cut this in half. Okay, so here we are. This is the tip of the lateral claw on the back right foot. So here is the dermis. This triangular part where you can see the white outline, I'm tracing it with the hoof knife. That is the edge of the pedal bone. Here is the marrow, or the interior part of the pedal bone itself. You can see all of the little blood vessels that feed this bone. Down here, this is the white line, so you can actually see this slightly darker part here is the white line that we were talking about earlier, and you can see it down here at the bottom. So this white line actually continues all the way through here and stops here, connecting the solar horn to the outer wall horn. Now remember, the outer wall horn is where all of the strength in a cow's claw is. Okay, so here's the other side of the same claw. All of the pressure comes down through the skeleton and through the pedal bone itself. And this fat pad here, so the digital cushion, is cushioning this fat pad here, so the digital cushion is cushioning the blow from that corium there to limit the stresses on the cow. Now this is what's actually happening. So if I push my finger here, this one here, hard, you'll see that the digital cushion will actually squash. You see the arteries are actually pushing blood out because this is a fresh cadaver. Now you can actually see that laminate very, very clearly here. I'm not sure if I'll pick it up on the camera, but you can see the laminae here much more clearly than you could on the other side. There has been a bit of bruising here, and there's the main blood source to the actual pedal bone itself. Here is the coronet, and you can see where the horn is actually beginning to form here, and again it would descend down the wall horn, down the axial or dorsal wall, all the way to the tip of the toe. On the inside it's much the same, but this tissue is much softer. There is suspensory apparatus up here in the form of fat, so you can see all this sort of globular stuff. Again, that provides cushioning, so all as you push down here you can see it's actually suspended, see it springs back up. Anyway, moving on to side view. Okay, so here is actually a cross section of the same horn. This one's actually the medial claw from the front, but never mind. So you can see the shapes within the claw much more clearly here. So here we have the solar horn, here we have the outer wall horn, the laminae are here running right up the pedal bone. The corium lines the top of the solar horn, and then you have the digital cushion, which starts about here. You can see it gets thicker and thicker and thicker, and this is all part of the digital cushion. This is the heel bulb that we were talking about earlier. You can see it's loaded with fat because this is where a lot of the pressure arrives from when the cow steps. So as the cow steps, it squidges like this. So this is P3. You can clearly see the outside of the pedal bone. So it starts here, goes all the way up here, around and down, and comes to a point. Now, it's actually obscured slightly here because of the way I've cut it. Okay, so here's a side elevation or cross section of the full length of the actual claw itself. So here's the dorsal wall, or the outer wall horn. Here is the solar horn running right the way along. P1 would have been here. This is the bottom portion of P2. And this is P3. We call it the pedal bone or the distal phalanx. This here is the navicular bone, so it's actually used as part of the socket for the bottom of P2. Now if you actually grab P2 here, you can see how it rotates in that joint. This is one of the things that's severely affected when there is actually an abscess or build up of pus or any sort of inflammation in the bottom joints. So solar horn, above that is the corium, you can see right along here, which is responsible for growing this horn or building the horn. Above that is the digital cushion, so you can see the digital cushion is actually a fat pad. So it starts here and extends all the way around and up the back of the periopal horn, or within the periopal horn. You can see how squidgy it is there. So if I actually squeeze this, you can see the digital cushion doing its job. So every time it pounds down on that digital cushion, the digital cushion effectively squidges and absorbs the impact of the pedal bone onto the corium. Now, sole ulcers. Sole ulcers is the main problem in dairy cattle that aren't routinely trimmed. Here is the main cause of it. So if I take my point of my knife, this again is the pedal bone, so it comes down here, goes along the bottom. So this point here is where all of the pressure comes right down through here and onto this point here. So it's actually a low point in the pedal bone, and that is where the corium and the digital cushion are nipped, and eventually this bursts out through and penetrates the outer world. So it bursts down through the actual solar horn, causing an ulcer. So this is the enemy of foot trimmers. And this here is the bottom of the deep flexor tendon, which is responsible for the vast majority of the locomotion within the actual foot itself. So this is what we were showing you earlier, that extends out through the sheath, right up the back of the leg, all the way up to the top of the hips. Then we have the laminae connective tissue, or the laminae corium. Starts here, extends all the way up to the actual coronet, which is up here. And then we have the coronet itself, which comes around here, and you can actually see in here. Now this is very important. You can see how thin it tails off to here. The bulk of the growing of the wall horn is done from here to this top portion of the coronet or the hairline, and then it descends down the connective tissues, it extends down the laminae, which run up like this, and eventually reaches the toe. Okay, so I think I've pretty much covered everything. Okay, so I'm really hoping I've covered pretty much everything that you guys can think of, or every question you could throw at me concerning the exterior anatomy of the cow's hoof and the interior anatomy of it. If there's any more questions, stick them in the comments below and I promise I'll answer them. Give me a like and click that subscribe button. Cheers guys.